Welcome to the Biltmore Church Podcast. Our church exists to glorify God by making disciples of Jesus who reach up, reach in, and reach out. And this podcast is a resource that's hopefully going to help you do just that. We're in week 3 of our new teaching series called One at a Time. We're going to be in this series all summer long, where we're looking at the times throughout the Gospels in the Bible where Jesus, he ministered to the crowds, but he often zoomed in on and focused in on the one person, the one individual, and he often had amazing life-changing conversations with individuals. And we're going to be looking at some of those examples over the next several weeks. This past week, we were in Matthew chapter 4, an example of where Jesus is tempted in the wilderness right before he begins his ministry. So we had a great conversation today, a little bit about how our enemy, Satan, often uses lies in order to tempt us and lead us astray. And there's one big overarching lie that he wants us to believe, and that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. And today is a very special episode. I think you're going to really enjoy it. If you're watching, you're going to see why. If you're listening, I'll go ahead and tell you that Pastor Bruce brought along a special guest today. His granddaughter, Elsie, who is 4 years old, was hanging with us today for the podcast recording. We got some awesome moments. Not just things that he said, but also some things that she jumped in with as well. So I can't wait for you to get a good laugh out of today's episode, but also you're going to hear some great stuff from Pastor Bruce as well. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Okay, well, we have a special guest with us today. Obviously, we have our lead pastor, Bruce Frank, and you have brought somebody along with you today for our podcast.
I brought my beautiful little granddaughter, Elsie Grace Frank. Just celebrated 4 years. She was on the playground and wanted to come talk to the microphone for a few minutes with me.
So here's my question for Elsie. What were you guys doing on the playground?
Being monsters.
Being monsters. So who was being a monster with you?
Dad.
No.
Papa, yeah.
Yeah, Papa was. Now, I heard right before we started recording, you said he was being a little silly. Is that true?
Yeah.
He's a silly guy.
That's what I show all the time. He thinks I'm like super silly.
Yeah, the silliest. We've never played monsters, though.
Yeah.
That's just reserved for you.
You know what?
What?
I got a grill at my house on my porch.
You got a grill? You like to grill out? What do you like to eat?
Chick-fil-A.
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 Listen,
there you go. We
you
raised
can't go wrong with that.
discipling her correctly.
That's awesome.
All right, we're going to talk for a minute. Okay? Okay.
Hanging out.
Hanging out.
All right, Pastor, you did a great job. Sunday, looking back, it was week 3. Hard to believe we're already 3 weeks into our One at a Time teaching series.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, first of all, just anything kind of Sunday recap. What stood out from last week from Sunday, whether it was something from the message or something that even God spoke to you throughout the week as you were prepping?
Well, I mean, on a personal note, it was interesting how the worship, the songs actually, before the message even began, ministered to me. Just a reminder, I kept thinking of that psalm. It says he's the lifter of your head. And so during the Psalms, just being distracted the last week or 10 days, it was a great reminder. I was trying to think of it just the way that this first, I mean, I love take you at your word. And then the second one was I believe, which was we hadn't done that in a long time. And then Living Hope was, so all of that was a great encouragement before we even got to the message.
Yeah.
But message-wise, I mean, yeah, that's a semi-familiar passage. It's like familiar but not familiar. So I look back, can't remember the last time I dug into that passage. You know, there's a parallel over in Luke.
Yeah.
But I can't remember the time and just the way the metric of feel something, be something, and be someone is kind of new in my orbit.
My nails
I think
are getting sharp now.
Are they? Yeah, got to be careful. Got to be careful. Those nails.
Clip those things.
Those are. I need some of those. My nails are not. My nails are not as pretty as yours. But that's what kind of stuck out to me, is just that metric of every temptation comes through one of those 3 conduits. And I've talked about those before, kind of out of the 1 John 2, things like verse 16, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, but how those come. And I had not done that. I think first actually, I say it all the time, but I mean, I think I remember reading or hearing or talking or something with Joby about those 3. And I'm like, you know what? they all come through those. I mean, it's some way I want to be somebody, so we act a certain way, or I want to feel something. And again, what we talked about yesterday, and I think I heard this years ago from like Charles Stanley.
Hey, Papa.
Yeah.
You know what?
What's that?
I drove up in my dad's car.
What?
Did you?
Yeah, and I was not feeling good.
Are you feeling okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
all
that's
right.
good.
If you get sick or something, you tell us. All right. We'll kind of push pause on the microphone and make sure you can throw up. But I'm glad you're feeling good. But just the idea that all three of those come through that in some way. But I think it was Charles Stanley a long time ago. I think that's the first time I heard the definition. It's usually or oftentimes a God-given desire. We try to meet a God-given desire in an un-God-given way. Again, whether that's, intimacy or getting pain-free or status or significance.
Right.
Not significance, approval is probably the better word.
Yeah.
Some of those are built in. We just want to find that approval in God. We want to find, that intimacy with another person in the bonds of Christian marriage. So the desire's not wrong. It's meeting those desires outside of God's will. It's always the trap.
So I want to dig in a little bit to one of the things that you talked about on Sunday, which is we have a playbook for what the enemy uses against us, right? And oftentimes that comes down to he's trying to convince you of lies.
I would say that's the thing that, almost every time that is the secret. That's the word. It's deception. It's hiding the hook.
Yeah. So I want to mix it up today. Try something a little bit different here.
Okay.
Is just say, okay, he's using lies on us, right?
Yep.
And the way to combat that is with truth, right? We've got God's word. We know what he says.
Absolutely.
So I would love to just do a little bit of a back and forth on, hey, what are some of the common lies? What is that?
A jumping shoot.
Come on.
Yeah, you picked that dress up by yourself too, didn't you? If I remember right.
Big fashionista.
Yes, she is.
How old are you now?
Was that a birthday dress?
No, it's not a dress. It's just,
Or
just jumping.
jumper. That's right.
Jump.
Oh, jumper.
Okay.
So it's pants.
Yeah.
Has pants.
Yeah. Let me finish my conversation and we'll go back and play some more.
Why?
That
Why to
is the
finish the
question.
conversation or why go play some more?
Yeah, podcasting is hard.
I know podcasting is hard. Okay. I can't remember what we're talking about. What were we talking
You're
about?
fine. We were talking about, so what are some of the common lies the enemy uses? Again, it's not like God's trying to keep us from something, but
Right.
it's for freedom. So the truth leads to freedom.
Yeah.
But would love to, I think oftentimes, especially in today's world, we are swimming in narratives, lies that the world's telling us, the enemy's telling us, and we don't even know it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, like I think about the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, so powerful because a lot of it, he was just naming the lies that we're prone to believe. So I'd love to just kind of let you think through, hey, what are some of those common lies? I'll throw out a couple as well, but just what are some of the things that you've seen as a pastor?
I mean, the umbrella one is to doubt the goodness of God.
Yeah.
It's to doubt the goodness of God because that kind of goes into everything from, it's from the 35-year-old person who wants to get married and is trying to hold up the standards, and it's like the doubt starts, like you're never going to get married, you're never going to find that person, all that kind of stuff. To if you're going through a trial, man, God's forgotten about you, or if God cared for you, he wouldn't let you go through this, or and it gets even bigger when, like in Jesus' case, he was hungry. I think we discount that. We discount the fact. I mean, that's him in his humanity. And the guy about joked. I mean, Lori did a 40-day fast.
Yeah.
I think 5 or 6 is the most I've ever done. But even at that, you are uniquely vulnerable because you are made in you're a soul in a body. So when our body's if you don't need any other example, look at like when you stay up too late and you have to get up early. Like people who stay up super late on Saturday night, I can almost see them in the audience because they're the ones struggling. Because but the lies would be overall doubt the goodness of God. So you're going to doubt the goodness of God, or you're going to be distracted. And we live in a culture, especially here in the West. There's so many. It's like these phones right here. It's like this 4-year-old. I'm trying to distract her. So, the idea is if either keep us distracted or help us doubt the goodness of God. Just doubt the goodness of God. And if once I start doing that, because think about Eve, the way he did it. The specific thing was, you're going to be like God, but the root of it was, God's holding out on you. God's holding out on you. If you think about it, anytime we sin, Anytime I choose to sin, I am doubting that God's way is best. And that deals with money. I mean, money's the big one. It's not as sexy as, an affair kind of thing.
Right.
But if you think about statistically, the amount of Christians who don't even do the bare minimum of what God asks us to do, somewhere in there is a lie we bought into, that either God won't take care of me if I even do a minimum of a tithe. I mean, it's like 25%, 20% or so of Christians tithe.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Christians don't give to anything at all kingdom-wise. And so what is that lie? That lie is either you know how to manage your money better than God does. God's not going to supply. You'll find your contentment in, the newest truck, the newest iPhone, the newest whatever. There's 100 of them like that. But I think for me, it's always the root of, is God's way good? Because I can't remember who it was that initially said, he said, every person you see is looking for happiness. And so what we eventually think is God's holding out on me, that I'm going to be happier not doing what God tells me to do than doing what God tells me to do. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy on the front end, but ultimately the happiness comes from him. I mean, that's why, Psalm 16 talks about in your presence is fullness of joy. In your presence. Not to stretch the example, but like right here, I'm just sitting here, and the biggest joy, and I'm a grandparent, not even a parent. Just the joy of, right there, like this. And think about it kind of inversely is like and I'm thinking she's having a pretty good time too, but just the whole idea of, guess what, when we're, Psalm 16 says, in your presence is fullness of joy, in your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So ultimately, do we believe that or not? Do we really believe that life with God is the best and most soul-satisfying thing? Sometimes, but our actions speak otherwise. So again, if I were to nail one thing down, it would simply be, do we doubt that God's way is the best way? Does he have our ultimate, is he ultimately for us?
Yeah.
He's really, ultimately he's for God, but you don't die for somebody you're not for. So he is, his way is best, isn't it?
You got anything to add? Any thoughts?
Anything? You got some good songs. You probably don't want to sing though, do you?
I have a microphone at my house.
Yeah, I know.
You sing.
You sang "Jesus Loves Me" in that microphone. I heard you.
Yes.
Can you sing it into this microphone?
No.
I didn't think you wanted.
That's a lot of pressure.
I didn't think you wanted to. What if Christian sings it with you?
Ooh.
Jesus loves me.
This I know.
I'm not going to sing this. The answer is no. Isn't it? Okay.
That's pretty good. I don't know if that's how the song goes, though, does it?
Yeah. All right. Give me a couple more minutes and we'll go play. Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like the big overarching...
Right there, you're wet right there.
I know, I'm sweating.
It's all the sweat.
So sweat.
The overarching idea that you're talking about there is like, can he be trusted? And the flip side of that, I think, is you've mentioned this frequently, because I think it's important for our people to wrap their heads around, is that often we believe God's a cosmic killjoy, So we don't do what he wants us to do because we think he, hey, our way is better. Whose way is better, right?
Yeah. And I remember that was early on as a new believer. Somehow, I don't know what does that, but even as a new believer, like in the first couple years, I actually thought that.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's the caricatures that people have of God or just our rebel nature or what is it. But even as a new believer, I was like, I hope God doesn't, I remember thinking this, hope God doesn't have me marry a unattractive lady and send me to Africa to be a missionary for the rest. I'm thinking that, and it's like, those are the craziest thoughts.
Yeah.
But they were there even early on. So I don't know if, again, that's just built into our, we inherited it from Adam and Eve or what, but that's there early on.
Yeah. So what would be just kind of for the person, I know you talked about this a little bit on Sunday, but just to wrap it up, for the person who's like, man, I feel like I'm being tempted left and right, or these trying to sort out the truth from the lies, maybe just some of those first steps for people who are looking for freedom. Again,
I would say, it is written that you got to, James, the book of James talks about the intricacies of temptation, and part of it goes through real specifically. It's like the bait is dropped, the bait attracts you, you go for it, and then you're caught, and it leads to death. I think what you want to do is what Jesus did in Matthew chapter 4 is you need to have an "it is written," something, and we know ourselves. That's why I tried to say, most of us can look back at patterns when we crashed and burned. And again, that might be losing your temper with your spouse. That might be, you name it. But usually there are patterns. Maybe when you're tired, maybe when you are, been out of town for a long time, maybe when you're stressed out, maybe when there's a number. I think you look there, when do I crash and burn? And then or who I'm with. A lot of times people are like, I'm strong until I get around the wrong peer group and then I'm toast. Well, there's probably, you probably need to be aware of that and realize maybe a different community is going to be best, at least short term for you. So I would say that's why I go back to, and I was trying to remember how to pronounce his name. I think it's Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. But again, I think the whole thing was that you see in Matthew 4 is know the enemy and know yourself. The enemy's going to lie to you, but you got to know yourself. What are your patterns of failure? And then get at least one or two it is writtens.
Yeah.
Again, whether it's, and I gave about 8 at the very end yesterday, but that could be everything from not wanting to forgive somebody to marital issues to being greedy to being discontent to anger issues. But just having it is written, something that you can do that super easy. You can go old school, put it on a 3x5 index card. I've got some sitting on my desk right now that I'm trying to memorize.
That's great.
You can do it when you're in the car. A lot of us have commutes. The part that I didn't say in one of the services, but one of the good things, I kind of high side on our addiction to our smartphones. What smartphones have shown us, though, is when you look at your screen time, getting in the Bible and getting a verse or two memorized on your, we have the time.
Yeah.
We have the time. If we can sit there and watch, little monkey videos or whatever, then we have the time to put in there. So that would be my first thing is, get in it is written to combat it because there's freedom there. That's what John 8, what Jesus said, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. So I would say know some truth. Yeah. Know some truth. It doesn't have to be a whole book, but you got to know some. And then boom, when that temptation comes, because normally there's a moment of decision. I think it was Charles Stanley again. I think he called it like an MOD, a moment of decision. So the moment of decision is like, again, going back to fishing. The bait is dropped. You see the bait. There's your moment of decision. Take David and Bathsheba. There's like 5 moments of decision that he had to run through the roadblocks that God had set up. And I would say for sure, unless we're stuck in a pattern where we just bust through it without any kind of pause, most of the time there's that little moment of decision, and then we get in a sin cycle that is so self-defeating. We sin, confess, I'll sin, I'll confess it later. And that is such a defeating lifestyle. And so the point is like, how do I break that? And it goes back to having a couple of it is writtens to kind of jar us back. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, ultimately sin is when we don't dislike God, we forget God at that moment. When I choose to walk across and do whatever, I am choosing to forget God. He's kind of put out of my mind for at least that brief amount of time. I think it's true.
Yeah, man, that's great feedback for everybody listening. Hope you'll take that to heart. Miss Elsie, you got anything you want to share as we wrap up our conversation today? Anything on your mind? Just ready to play some more?
You're ready to go eat lunch, aren't you?
Chick-fil-A?
No, not Chick-fil-A. It's whatever Mom and Daddy packed for them.
Packed lunch. I like it.
Hey, do you know how to say loved and sent? Can you say loved and sent?
Loved and sent.
Here, say it to that microphone. Say, you're loved and sent.
You're loved and sent.
Boom. Yeah.
Good job.
Great job.
Good job.